Thank you a lot. Very good. So Moshe Vardi, coming from Rice University, States. We heard a lot about your active articles in Communications of ACM today. So now we are very curious what you are going to provoke in your talk.
Thank you. So what is digital humanism? Well, we don't exactly know. There is a whole page here in the program that tries to aim in the definition. But when I read it, I think it's almost the very last sentence that captures it. People are the central focus. Technology is for people and not the other way around. We need to put humankind in the center of our work. To me, that really captures it. Now, I'm a hardcore technologist. I've been doing computer science research now for 40 years. And if you ask me 10 years ago what I thought about technology, I would say technology is good, more technology is better, most technology is best. But I had a moment of awakening in 2011. This was when IBM Watson won the game of Jeopardy. And that was really way beyond what AI has done before. And we suddenly got a glimpse that AI is not just some remote, in principle, you think, okay, if a computer is big enough and powerful enough, yeah, it can be intelligent. Suddenly, it seems that it's going to happen in our lifetime. And I started thinking, okay, what's going to be the consequence of this? And I got interested in the topic of work. What is the future of work? And I started talking to economists. And I've done a lot of reading over the past, it's now 8 years. And I want to share with you what I have learned. So let's start with a particular example of automation. Let's talk about the automobile. So I consider automobile to be the most significant industrial product of the 20th century. Not the transistor, not the computer. They were probably the most important industrial product of the 21st century. But if you look at the 20th century, wow. The automobile in the United States in particular, it's such a large country. The automobile has really defined urban geography. Come to Houston, which was a city was developed after World War II. It's a huge city because of the automobile. Building automobiles from America built such a mighty industrial infrastructure in the United States. That's what made the United States a superpower, this industrial infrastructure. Not to mention even the symbolic, the car culture, adulthood and freedom, even in dystopian science fiction movie. This is from Mad Max. People were driving this kind of dystopian cars. But the automobile comes with a huge societal cost that we simply have learned to accept as the cost of doing business. Every year, more than 1 million people get killed in car crashes. The number of people who gets injured is much, much bigger. The property damage is humongous. It mostly affects people in the middle part of their life. If you're a teenager in the United States, what is your biggest risk? DWT, which means driving while texting. Used to be DWI. That's passé now. Now the biggest risk is DWT. So who is responsible for this carnage? We talk about carnage. Look to your left, look to your right, look at yourself. We are responsible. We're a terrible driver. This has been fully investigated. About 95% of all car crashes are due to human error. So there is now a massive effort underway to automate driving. Over 250 companies, going from the big tech company, such as Waymo, part of Alphabet with Google, and the traditional car manufacturers, the new transportation companies, the Uber, and a huge number of startups. And they're all lasting over a market that's estimated in the trillions over the next decade or 2 decades. Lots of technical issues have yet to be resolved. People say 5 or 15 years. I think after what we have seen recently with autonomous, with maybe people are less confident, and now we'll say, well, maybe 15 or 20 years. I'm a bit less optimistic. But there's no doubt in my mind it's going to happen. The only question is when. There are legal issues. There are huge number of business issues. Some people estimate cars are incredibly inefficient product. Most of the time, my car, on a normal day, I use it for about half an hour, 15 minutes each direction. Most of the time, it's doing nothing. It's incredibly inefficient. If instead cars were coming around and I will get easy transportation to work and back, I don't need to own a car. And so some people estimate a shrinkage of about 90% in the number of cars actually being used. The impact is even go beyond what we think. To give an example of an impact, if you need today to get a liver transplant, kidney transplant, maybe somebody will donate a kidney. But suppose you need a liver transplant or a heart transplant. Where do you get it? Nobody donates their liver. Nobody donates their heart. Somebody is going to get killed in a car crash, and that's how you're going to get a liver or a heart. What happens if suddenly all this disappears? Nobody knows. On the other hand, the societal benefit is overwhelming. Just saving million lives per year and freeing lots of people who are not limited in mobility. This will be, so I think this is the best thing since sliced bread. But here is a map of the most common job in every state in the United States. This is 2014, but it's really not changed much. And you can see that in more than half the states, the most common job, this is the job with the most number, the job with most people working in their job, is a driver, truck driver. So there are millions of people who are making a living by driving. Either they are real truck and taxi driver or bus drivers, and now there are hundreds of thousands of Uber drivers, and there are many more millions. Think of what is a postal delivery worker. It's mostly a driver. This extra step of taking a thing and delivering to your door, small drone can do it as effectively. And once you automate, if we are able to automate automobiles, then really the whole logistical supply chain can be automated. Ports are already being in the process of being automated. Cargo ship is going to be much easier to automate because they don't have to worry about children jumping after a ball. So now we're talking about a massive number of jobs that all have to do somehow with moving things around, and all of this is going to be automated, sometimes probably in the next 25 years. So clearly this is going to cause a massive loss of jobs, and the question is, what will happen? What will happen? And so now you have a debate between economies. Traditional neoclassical economies tell you there's nothing to worry about. For example, Ken Rogoff, an economist, a neoclassical economist from Harvard, says, since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, a recurrent fear has been that technological change will spawn mass unemployment. Neoclassical economists predict that this would not happen because people will find other jobs, albeit possibly after a long period of painful adjustment. How long? He doesn't say. How painful? He doesn't say. By and large, that prediction is proven to be correct. We'll come back to that. But other important economists, Paul Krugman, wrote a New York Times editorial, can innovation and progress really hurt a large number of workers, maybe even workers in general? The truth is that it can, and certain economists have been aware of this possibility for almost 2 centuries. So these are two very distinguished economists, and the debate in a nutshell, is it different this time or is it not different this time? Who knows? This is today a topic of intense interest. Almost not a week goes by without a new study being released, and whether it's an academic study or it's a consulting company or what have you. McKinsey makes one prediction, Gartner makes another prediction, Oxford University another prediction. And about a year ago, MIT Technology Review tried to survey the space of prediction and try to get to some consensus, and they said they threw their hands in the air. There is no consensus. They said there are about as many opinions as there are experts. Now, why is that? Why there are so many different predictions? So there's a Danish proverb that says predictions are difficult, especially about the futures. But I think the Danes got it wrong. Predictions are easy, especially about the future. Everybody can make a prediction. What is hard Hard is correct predictions. That's really hard. So I'm not going to make predictions. I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen in the future. But let's talk about the past. And I'm going to take as a past a case study which is US manufacturing. Why US manufacturing? First of all, the US is a huge economy. It's about 25% of world GDP in one country. And it's a relatively very free economy compared, for example, European economies. There's much more government involvement. And the US economy is much more a laissez-faire economy. And you can see that manufacturing is huge. It's the biggest sector of the US economy. It's twice as big as the next sector, which is government and everything else. So it's a huge sector of the economy, measured in many, many trillions of dollars. So it has been subject to efforts at automation now for decades. So what happened? So here is, I think, in some sense to me, this is the one plot that summarizes it all. It goes back to 1950. And the red line is output in constant dollars. That means adjusted for inflation. And what you can see is that by and large, it goes up. Of course, there are ups and downs. You can see down over there the Great Recession of 2008. By now, we're coming out of it. So by now, by 2019, we're at peak manufacturing close to about $2.4 trillion of net added value. But what happened to employment? You can see, again, there are ups and downs. This is what happened in the economy. There are recessions and booms. But we peaked there about around 1980. And essentially, we've been going down since then. Again, you see that we're going up now, but we were just coming up from the recession. But the overall trend is still going down. Now, why is that? Why is employment going down when volume is going up? And answer, it's very simple. It has to do with productivity. And productivity is driven by automation. And you can see that over just the past 20 years, we have doubled productivity. And if you want to see something interesting, you can later do a web search on Tesla Model 3 factory. And you'll see a beautiful video of a factory which is fully automated. In fact, these are called dark floor factories because they only turn the lights on when you want to take pictures, because the robot don't even need the light. Okay? So the level of automation is amazing. So now we can ask, okay, wow, this is a nice test case for automation. Many millions of jobs. We lost about 8 million jobs in manufacturing. So what happened? What happened because of all these losses? And what I'm going to show you now that the impact of automation on middle and working class American has been actually very harsh. And while the neoclassical economists may be right that in the long term we don't need to worry about it, as Keynes said, in the long term we're all dead. Okay? The question is what happened when you tell people, you can tell them, don't worry, your great-grandchild will do fine. That's not a satisfactory answer to people concerned. The question is, what do we do now? So here is kind of the great picture of what happened. So there are 4 key numbers in economics when you look at this issue of economy and how does it work for people. And the answer is, one is productivity. Productivity is very important because how does an economy grow? Either population grows or productivity grows. That's what makes economy grow. And if economy grows, then you expect GDP to grow. If productivity grows, then the economy will grow. This is GDP growth. And what you expect is new jobs will be created and people's income will rise. And in fact, as you see, post-World War II, until the early 80s, these 4 things kind of go together. So economy is almost so that this is an economic law. All you have to worry about productivity. Everything else will take care of itself. Except it turned out that this is just not the case. That since 1980, productivity has continued to grow, not as fast as we'd like, but still continue to grow. And because productivity grew, GDP grew. But we are not as good at generating jobs. The job creating machine has flattened, and income is not rising either. That means that the tide is rising, but it's not lifting all boats.
Delocalization of work doesn't come.
We'll come back to that. Okay. We'll come back to that. So here is there are certain slides here that when I saw them, I gasped. Because they really, oh my God, how did I not know it? This is so bad. So this looks at real means adjusted for inflation, real is the same as constant, median yearly income, white men with no college degree. And what you see is over a period of 40 years, it has gone down. Now you can think, you see these political rallies in the United States, where you see white men, and almost all of them are working class men, and they're kind of, you can see the anger in their eyes, they're waving their fist. And we used to see this picture of men waving their fist, they usually would be somewhere in the Middle East, and they would say, death to the United States and things like that. But now we see them in the United States, we're asking, what are these people so angry about? The answer is, this is what they're angry about. This is what they're angry about. And so what we are seeing in the United States now over the past 50 years is a growing inequality now that reminds people of what happened in the 1920s, where there was a huge level of inequality. So this is, to me, a very stark. It looks at the income that goes to the top 1% and the income that goes to the bottom 50%. And it used to be the bottom 50% earn about 20% of the income, and the top 1% earn around 10%. But now this has flipped. Now the top 1% is earning 20%, and the bottom 50% has gone down to 10%. And the implication of this have to do, for example, with social mobility. So it is well known that the more inequality you have, the lower the level of social mobility. So mobility means that one generation is doing better than the previous generation. And you go back to the 1940s, if you are 30 years old, the probability was 90% that you're going to do better than your parents. And now it's 50%. It's a toss-up whether you're going to do better or worse than your parents. So this has huge consequences. For example, what we are seeing in the United States now is students going to humanities is just collapsing. Because the tremendous anxiety, will I have a good job when I graduate? And so engineering is booming, humanities have crashed. There's one level of this tremendous economic anxiety by the students. Now, you hear a lot about how unemployment now in the United States is a historical low. What you need to understand is that unemployment, the way it is reported, is a number that have been manipulated by politicians to a level of meaninglessness. What it counts is how many people that are looking for a job are not finding a job. Finding a job means if you have 1 hour a week, you found a job, okay? So what happened about people who just stopped looking for a job? They just gave up. So economists pay more attention to labor force participation. That ask how many people are working or looking for a job. They are in the labor force. And what you see here, and to me this is another gasp slide, this has been going down now for 50 years. So it used to be, now we're looking here at men. The picture for women is more complicated. Why? Because in the 60s they're entering the workforce, so it will muddy the message. There's also recent decline, but it will muddy the message. I want to make it very stark here. We're looking at men between 25 and 54. This is called prime age male. They typically finish education, unlike some of us here who taken forever to finish their PhD. But typically by 25 they finish their education, and they are way too young usually to retire. This is prime age male, it's called. And you see this has been going down for 50 years. And it looks worse when you stratify this by education. So you see that it went down for all educational level, but for bachelor, the drop is not huge. But if you are high school or less, you went from 97% to 82%. Now these are people in the workforce. It doesn't count the people who are not working. Amongst these people, there's also unemployment. Some of these people don't have jobs. So that means that if you today look at working class men, these are men without college education, high school or less, maybe 1 in 4 is not working. And when you think 1 in 4 unemployment level, this is a country in economic depression. This is what happened, Greece after the economic crisis. This is what's happening in the heart of America today among working class people. And you need to take into account every industrial job lost means another about because these were well-paying jobs, another 3 or 4 other jobs in the community are lost because of that. So what's really happening here? So the answer is it all depends on your skill level. So what does it mean? For the people in our social circle, who are professional, educated professionals, this economy that requires high cognitive skills and high education, this is actually a very good economy. These are called high-skill jobs. So you can see high-skill occupation. They used to be 26%. They're actually growing. There are more jobs at the high end of the skill spectrum. The very low end of the skill spectrum, in fact, there is a mild growth of job, but I don't know how significant it is. But if you think about it, take the job of cleaning table at a restaurant. Nobody can build a robot today to do that. And we pay these people minimum wage, so there's no economic motivation to make the effort to automate it. So where does it make a sense to automate? You want to automate middle-skill jobs. Because if you look at manufacturing, the job is fairly routine. You do very predictable things, which means it's easy to automate. And these people were paid $20 to $30 an hour. That means they had an annual income of $40,000 to $60,000 a year. So there is economic motivation to automate. So you see the middle skill jobs, that's the part that has shrunk from almost 60% of the job now to its 45%. So this is why economists call it the polarization of the job market. So some segment of the economies are doing very well. These are the high end, high skill. The low skill, there's not much difference. It's the middle skill where the impact is. Yes?
So these are the percentages, but in terms of absolute numbers, is the high skill occupations a lot more than in the 2012 and 1983, or is that hard to say?
No, I mean, this is even more because the population is growing. Population is growing, yeah. So in terms of high skill, in terms of numbers, even let's suppose that this pie is the same, absolutely. The population is growing. That means there are fewer jobs at the middle skill level. And you can see it when you look at, ultimately you can look at income. You can see, again, over a period of about 40 years, if you have an advanced degree, you're doing much better. College degree, you're doing well. If you only have like 2 years of college, you just kind of kept even. But if you have high school or less, especially if you have less than high school, these are really the low end of the skill spectrum. These are people that have really lost, and you can see they are not happy, these people. Now, until 4 or 5 years ago, if you ask economists, they said these are the numbers, and there are always debates, are we calculating inflation properly, but these are numbers from the Federal Reserve Bank. These are very reliable numbers. But these numbers don't tell us what happened. I kind of imply that this is caused by automation. But where's the evidence for that? And if you went back 5 years ago and you ask economists this is the case, there will be a spectrum of opinions. Many people will say it's because of automation, but not everybody would agree. Some people say it's because of globalization, factories move away. Even though you say, wait a minute, factories move away, how come volume is going up? You basically, the answer is what happens? What happens? Low margin industry moved away. We don't do textile in the United States anymore. We don't make sneakers anymore in the United States. The new industries are all high-end industries with higher degree of automation. So if the industry depends on cheap labor, it is not sustainable in the United States anymore. So this industry move away, but industry as a whole is growing up. The new evidence came about 2 years ago that went and looked now at locality by locality. And they look at the correlation between deployment of industrial robots and loss of jobs. And that really changed many people's mind, the fact that we see such a strong, again, it's a correlation, but the problem in economics, you cannot run controlled experiments to get really causality. But by 2017, Laura Tyson was an economist at Berkeley, and she was the chief economic advisor of President Clinton. And she said, among economists, however, the consensus that about 80% of the loss in US manufacturing jobs over the past 3 decades was the result of labor saving and productivity enhancing technological change with trade coming a distant second. So I said there is a big shift in opinion over 5 years, and now people are convinced that automation is the key reason for what we have seen. So now let's take the historical perspective. Let's go back to the economists who say, well, the Industrial Revolution happened and everything is fine. So it is true that technology has always been destroying jobs, and they have to create, new jobs have to be created. This has always been the case. What did we always do? We always took new jobs that machines were not able to do. Okay? This was when machines started doing work in agriculture, jobs moved to industry where you manufacture these machines. So we always had to race the robots. This is a book was written about it, the race Against the Machine by Eric Brynjolfsson. Are we convinced that we can always outrace the machine? They're faster than us, stronger than us. We still have some advantages, agility, dexterity. There's no machine that can really, just a human hand is amazing. We used to be smarter. Well, the competition is getting tougher. So, you know, part of the goal in computer science is to emulate human intelligence, human capabilities. And we're getting better and better at it. So why do we think that humans will always be able to stay ahead? There's another important point to consider, which is the tipping point. Tipping point is really what physicists would call phase transition. When suddenly there is a very dramatic change, this has become very popularized by a book by Malcolm Gladwell on suddenly these massive changes that happen very quickly, where quantitative change become a qualitative change. Why is tipping point important? Because we are still living in this world. So if you're an economist, imagine an economist asking the year 1700 to predict economic growth in the next 100 years. So this will be here. This economist would look back to the birth of Jesus Christ and would say, at most 0.1% per year. And I'm basing it on almost 2,000 years of history. Except that we know that these economists would be terribly wrong because, poof, an exponential explosion started, and we're living up there, right? It is still going on. So a tipping point is a huge thing and can change everything. And maybe we're living today in a similar tipping point with advances in computing that we're still feeling we're just the beginning of this phase. So this was put very nicely by the Nobel laureate economist Wassily Leontiev in a paper in 1983, in which he put the parable of the horses. So imagine two horses. One is a neoclassical horse, and the other one is a neo-Luddite horse. And the neo-Luddite horse is very worried. And he says, you know, I heard about the Ford Model T, and I'm really worried. Once this become popular, who will need horses anymore? There will be no more jobs for horses. And in neoclassical horses, don't worry. Technology always destroys jobs for horses. It always creates new jobs for horses. New jobs that we cannot yet imagine. Nothing to worry about. So it so happened we are now about 100 years later, and we can say who was right. The answer was the neo-Luddite horse was right. Acorn population in the United States peaked in 1915. There are really no more jobs for horses. Horses are pets. There are no jobs for horses. They are pets. That's it. Technology has not created new jobs for horses. So now let's go back to the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, it did happen, and we are all infinitely richer because of that. And you think, okay, we are fine, nothing to worry about. But this is an incredibly reductive view of what happened in the Industrial Revolution. Okay? The Industrial Revolution created tremendous amount of pain, and society had to adapt to it. It took about 200 years to adapt to it. How do you adapt to the Industrial Revolution? Is the emergence of the modern social welfare state. It started in the middle of the 19th century. It took about 100 years. It only really finished in Europe after the war, United States probably in the 1960s, when we finally created a social welfare, kind of a safety blanket for everybody, better or worse in different countries. Let's not forget, there took one reason that societies in the West were motivated to do that, because they know what happens otherwise. the two communist revolutions, and the death toll is estimated to roughly about 100 million people. So to say the Industrial Revolution happened and we adapted so there's nothing to worry about is incredibly historically naive. It was painful, it was long, slow, and agonizing. We adapted. If we're going to repeat the same 200 years, then we deserve it. In fact, how did Marx become Marxist? Marx became Marxist because he read Engels' book. And Engels described the plight of working class people in the United Kingdom. And there is something that we call now, it's called Engels' pause. So the Industrial Revolution started roughly around 1770, and you can see how GDP is starting to go up, GDP per worker, but wages were flat for about 70 years. And the misery was unimaginable. I mean, Engels wrote the book about the misery of the working class people in the United Kingdom. And that's how Marx became Marxist, in a reaction to what was happening in the United Kingdom. So, will technology destroy jobs? Absolutely. Will technology create jobs? Absolutely. There are many, many jobs. We will talk about website designer, and on and on and on, all kinds of jobs that never existed before. Will there be enough new jobs to compensate for the old jobs? Nobody knows. What about the speed of destruction, the speed of creation? Nobody knows. What about the skill level? Suppose you take a truck driver, and you see your job as a truck driver is gone, but we have a job for you. You can write software for automated trucks. Well, I suspect there are a few truck drivers that are smart enough and they can make this transition, but this is not the solution to all truck drivers to become software engineers. Okay? I heard once a very nice talk about the project that was called Miners to Coders. It was going in Appalachia, finding coal miners that lost their job, and training them to be coders. Sounds very nice. So I asked again, so how many miners have you converted to coders? And the guy says, 15. I said, 50? He said, no, 15. Very nice, but 15 people. This is not a solution for society. What about location? Tell people in Appalachia, you know, we have jobs for you in Silicon Valley. They can't afford to move there. So it's just because technology creates new jobs does not mean there's nothing to worry about. Here's an example. This is, I think, from a World Economic Forum in 2017. The jobs that AI will create. It's an amazing list. I have to say, I don't even know fully what they mean. What is context designer? But I can tell you one thing about this. None of this job is a job for people with only high school education. These are all the jobs they require, by looking at it, at least a bachelor degree, if not more. So again, we have to worry about, right now in the United States, only about 1/3 of the population, about 35%, is getting college degree. About 1/3 has college degree, 1/3 has some college, and 1/3 has no college at all. Just to give an example about the number of jobs, you can compare Detroit in 1990. Now we look at Detroit as a kind of a failed city. But Detroit was the Silicon Valley of the United States for many, many years. It was the center of American industry. 1990, not that long ago, the market valuation of the 3 big car manufacturers was $65 billion. They employed 1.2 million workers. Now you go to Silicon Valley. You take the 3 big companies in Silicon Valley, which will be Alphabet, Apple, and Facebook. And they have a market value of about $2 trillion. This goes up and down, but around $2 trillion. They have less than 200,000 workers together. So you can create tremendous amount of wealth, but you don't need today so many people to do that. So how did we adapt to the Industrial Revolution? We continually renegotiated the social compact, the arrangement, the contract that we have of how people are going to make a living. And almost everything that we take for granted about work, the right to strike, the right to unionize, child labor, abolition of child labor, the 40-hour work week, equal pay, health and safety laws, all of this, it was a hard fight to get each one of them. Nothing came easy. Everything was a hard fight. You can see it started 1842, and some of it finished by 1970. Now there is a new idea. We can spend 45 minutes just discussing it, so I won't. But this universal basic income, it's on the table. There is at least one Democratic candidate for the 2020 election, Andrew Yang, who has this in his platform. So we will be hearing more about it. Just to give you one idea how we adapted to the Industrial Revolution, look at how many hours people work in a given week. So you go back to 1840, people used to work about 70 hours a week. And gradually, it went down to about 40 hours. And magically, and I don't fully understand why, it stopped there. If we just continue now, we will be working less than 30 hours a week in the United States. No, the work is still 40 hours a week. So one way we saved the jobs after the Industrial Revolution, we defined the jobs down. A job was fewer hours per week. But we have not done it now for about 50 years, more than 60 years. Not clear why. So I will finish by quoting Jason Furman. He was the chairman of the Council of Economic Affairs for President Obama. And he wrote a report about AI in 2016. And he said, everybody's worried about the future and the singularity and what happened in the future. He says, I'm just worried. Take the number that we have seen and just extrapolate them. Take these trends and just extrapolate them to continue as they are. He said, that's what worries me, is the current trends will just continue as they are. I'm not worried about the singularity. That means that we have a huge challenge of rethinking many domestic policies, education, taxation, trade, housing, in order to effectively address what I believe is a huge challenge, the challenge of automation and its impact on labor. Thank you.
So, thanks a lot. So 1, 2, 3, I'm coming.
Thank you, Moshe. You missed one important aspect, which is policy, because when you look at your data, it's 1980, and this is Reagan, and it was Thatcher in the UK. They destroyed trade unions. They destroyed somehow the welfare state. Since then, the US was on the way to a social democratic welfare state. This was destroyed. UK was also destroying this. So I think this is an important message to say. It's not just automation, it's not just technology. So I think it's that we have exogenous factors, which are also policy, and this is also what the workshop is a little bit about. So we are not talking only about technology, about ethics or better design. We are talking about policy and policy rules. And I think you shouldn't miss that, because to your time series,
can I get another 45 minutes?
Yeah, okay, we can.
So
just to mention that.
So you're absolutely right and you're absolutely wrong at the same time. And what I mean by that is absolutely. I mean, I just left here. I said we have a huge policy challenge, and that's a whole other talk. What are the policies that we talk about? Some have to do really with what we do. It's education, right? It's not just policy for other people. It's how we think about education. But if you ask me, as you know, I don't wear a jacket. Okay? So I was here in December, and you asked me, are you cold? Suppose I said, yes, I'm cold. Was it because the temperature is low, or because I don't wear a jacket? The answer is, I'm cold because if I were to be cold, because the temperature is low. Wearing a jacket would be a good response to that. So what you say, I said, the United States is the case, and the UK is the same. They have decided to remove many of these policies, and they let just the market do its magic. So the answer, what we see here, that the market itself does not fix this, does not deal with it. And that's really my point here. The market, if you think the market will live with it, I think this shows that it doesn't. So what it does mean, and in fact, people have done these studies, of course, looking at different countries, and the answer is policy matters a lot. For example, if you compare the level of inequality in the United States and Europe, continental Europe, it is much lower in continental Europe. Policy is incredibly important. I don't mean at all to diminish it, but we need to understand, first of all, what is the economic thing that's driving it? Because many people really believe that the market will take care of it. And this is really what I was trying to disabuse from the notion is this belief by some neoclassical economists, nothing to worry about. Technology destroy job, create new job, nothing to worry about. No, the market by itself does not fix it. The market doesn't care if there are many people who are unemployed. Okay, the market does not optimize for that. It may optimize it all for total volume. if that. But definitely not for cumulative welfare of everybody. And so I completely agree with you on that. Policy is incredibly important. Without policy, we are going to simply continue the trends that we've seen until now.
Okay, just a couple of quick remarks. I have an observation concerning your last question about why the working hours per week have not gone down.
To go down, yeah.
And the answer is in the graphs you have shown before, that at the same time productivity has continued to grow, and the difference in income between the top people and the lowest people is beginning to widen. So it's clear that most of people has continued to work there without diminishing their work, so that the capital, quote, could earn even more. So I think this is pretty clear. And I agree with you that the answer is political, so it's matter of policy, because that was the product of the market. The fact that the number of hours per week didn't went down, it's because there was a clear a market gain in not happening this.
In fact, Keynes predicted in the 1930s, he said we should be working 15 hours a week by now. And maybe he was wrong, but clearly, if you just do a linear regression, we should be working 30 hours a week. The rest of the time, we can all do just email. Yes.
So thank you very much for your talk. You will be surprised. I'm one of the directors of the largest union here in Austria, and I'm neither neoclassical nor neo-ludite. But I think some of your points were very correct, the things about inequality. But what you said about the labor market, I am quite skeptical, especially when you look at Europe.
Which part of the labor market? Just clarify to me.
I want to talk about the European labor market, manufacturing in Europe. If you look at Germany...
Just to say, I was very clear. I was trying to depict the picture in the United States.
Okay, but I want to put the European picture aside of this, because here in Austria and in Germany, we do see that manufacturing is still important, and that we have not lost employment, although there was automatization since the 1980s, 1990s. And this is because we have different education policies, and this is because we have different social policies. And I'm also an economist, and your story about automated driving, I think it's a good story. But you can also tell the story when the train was invented. Suddenly you only needed one driver and one stoker caring for the fire to transport hundreds of people. So coachmen were getting unemployed, blacksmiths were getting unemployed, and so on. Nevertheless, at the end of the story, there were many more jobs afterwards. And you asked us what's the comparative advantage of human beings over robots and computers. And it's that we can do very many things despite we do them on a mediocre level. So computers and robots do one thing in an exquisite way, but we are better at all those multitasking and out-of-the-box tasks. So I completely agree with the gentleman before me. It's not automation which is harsh on jobs. It's a development, neoliberal policies which reduced the social welfare state, which weakened unions, and which redistributed towards the rich. These are the harsh things why the people in America are angry about. It's not automation, and we should stop blaming the robots. We should put the blame in the right place. Thank you.
So, two things. One, it's never the robot's fault, right? They're just doing what they're told to do. Some of your facts are wrong. For example, Germany used to be, if you look at the United States manufacturing, we used to be, if you go back a couple of generations, used to be about 25% of the workforce was in manufacturing, and now it's below 10%. Germany, it's true, it is much higher, it's 25%, but it is down for what it used to be 45%. So when you say that you don't see the law, so, but the point is that, yeah, even manufacturing sector in Germany, the employment does shrink. It's not true, it doesn't shrink. It is true that a combination of both policy, government policy, education, all of this means that it is going down at a slower rate in the United States. Okay? Now, we can argue about causality that says, if I shoot you and you die, did you die because I shot you, or did you die because you're not wearing a bulletproof vest? Okay? We can now have a philosophical debate about it. The point is, there is a trend that's continuing to go, which is automation. It's continuing to go. And the question is, and I agree, I said it is now the question, how do we respond to it? Okay? Now, what it is true, that in a given setting, if you ask me, if I automate this, what will the impact of job? The answer is, no one knows. And the answer is why no one knows is because the marketplace is very complicated. The labor market is not always efficient. I mean, take even something much simpler than that, okay? I'm selling widgets in a small store, and I'm going to raise the price, I'm going to lower the price of the widgets. Will I make more money or less money? You're an economist, so the answer is, it depends. It depends on the elasticity of the supply or the price-demand curve, right? And so the same thing, if you automate a job, it will reduce the cost of production, therefore prices will go down, demand will grow, that will create more jobs, but at the very end, there will be more job or fewer jobs? The answer is, we don't know a priori. In some sectors, it ends up creating more jobs. In other sectors, create fewer jobs. In manufacturing, we saw we have lost millions of jobs, and it explains much of the misery of the United States. You can argue it's because we didn't have the right policies, and yeah, this is true too. I said now it's a philosophical debate about causality. But to say that automation has nothing to do with it, to ignore the reality, that's what's driving the change. The question is, how do we respond to it?
Okay. I'm in full agreement that nobody knows what's going to happen. But I would like to bring in another controversy where economists have difficulty in agreeing. And that's the recent controversy about, does productivity really grow since digitalization, or is it slowing down? It was started by the economic historian Gordon, who compared it to what happened in the 80s of the last century, etc. And others like Mokia, another economic historian, says no, because we don't have the GEP, we don't have the categories, the classification to measure the growth in productivity introduced through digitalization. But my question is really, is there not another shift that is behind it that we should also take into account? And that's the decoupling between what is called the real economy and the financial sectors. And the financial sectors are global. The kind of interlinkage that we have now has never occurred before. And you can also say there is a secular shift between natural resources and labor, which was why the thing went up. And now it's moving towards the two most important factors being information and capital. Capital in the sense of the financial services. And I think whatever we are debating here, unless we also look at what is happening, this decoupling of real economy and the financial world, which is behind also the inequality that Piketty and others have alluded to, I think we miss something.
So there are
just to productivity, because there is also the observation that innovation is going down. So real innovation is going down.
So the economy is a very complicated beast, and there are many things going on. So there is a whole issue they call the computer productivity paradox, and it's a whole other story. Let's not go there. There are also, what's driving the economy are many factors. One has to do, for example, we discussed with neoliberal policy, the decline of unions. That has been a major effect, especially in the US, United States, in the United Kingdom. The other one is, as you pointed out, the financialization. And so, for example, we looked, and this is actually one result of information technology. So, for example, you look when you look at the Great Recession, you say, why did it happen? And there are lots of analyses. But in some sense, it was enabled by information technology, because the securitization of mortgages, the ability to take all kinds of mortgages, convert them to security, bundle them, unbundle them, selling them to small towns in Norway. All of this was enabled by information technology. So financialization, one thing we see is that if you go back, I think until maybe 1980, and you look at what part of corporate profits go to the financial industry. The financial industry is really they're all middlemen. They're doing nothing productive other than moving money around. Very important for modern economy. And for many, many years, there used to be that the rate of profit for them, out of all profit, corporate profit, it would be 15% will go to the financial industry. And people say, okay, it's like a commission. 15%, okay, we can live with it. Then it started to go up and up and up. It went up to almost, by 2008, it was almost 40%. And since then, it's been gone down a little bit, but it's still much higher than 15%. So much more the economy is financial, and this is a whole other big issue. There's a whole other issue. There's a weakening of antitrust laws. The laws are there, but not being enforced as vigorously as they used to be enforced. So there's much more concentration. You look, for example, at the top 5 corporations, tech corporations in the United States, they have market value of over $4 trillion. And so there's huge concentration. And many people say that it's this concentration that actually suppresses also innovation. So it's very complicated. It's very hard to disentangle all the factors. All the point I was trying to make here that automation is a real issue. If you think that the free markets will deal with it, it doesn't. And what happened with it, it's up to us. And so whoever said it's about policy, I agree. Yeah, that's my bottom line. It's about policy.
Moshe, this was a wonderful entry point to my question. You started with autonomous driving, and I think that this drive towards autonomous driving comes first because it can't be done. It's just a huge techno-fascinating dream, and because it's good for corporations and it's bad for corporations that don't jump this boat. So Mike, and I loved what you say, and I loved your English book explanation and all these things, but why the hell did you start with the road deaths and road injuries? I would never have come to the idea that this might be a reason to develop automated driving. And here we are with the questions, why are these things happening? Yeah, my question is not only the direct question, so but one more. Good. Why are we doing these things?
So I tell you why this is relevant. Because who is enabling the automation of driving? I don't know how many people are here are computer scientists. Okay, about half, let's say, computer scientists. We're enabling it. So if I thought that this is just a bad thing, that this will have only negative results, that it's only driven by corporate greed, I would tell people, if you do research on CPS, cyber physical systems, and automation, all the things, stop doing it. This is just for corporate greed. I actually think because I wrote a column about it some years ago, the moral imperative of doing this research, because I think this research is ultimately very beneficial to society. If I thought I'm just doing something bad, I would say I should stop. But I actually think that this is very beneficial to humanity, because I can't say let's keep killing 1 million people a year to save jobs. To me, this is not morally justifiable. So
I interrupt you here because you do that also sometimes. So
you
are one of the. Now it's impolite from my side. I see, but you are one of the few engineers who says that, because most of the engineers says, well, technology is neutral. It's in the hand of the users, and if there's some great scientific idea we can bring to fruition, we will do it anyhow. And we have heard some nice and nasty examples this morning. So I think one of the reasons why are we here together is this attitude of many engineers that they don't care shit whether millions are dead. Yeah, that's my view.
My point was that even if I'm an ethical engineer, I think that automating driving has a moral justification, even though it come up with humongous societal impact. It doesn't mean I think we should not do it just to save jobs. I heard the argument, people say we should stop automating cars to save jobs. And to me, I don't buy this. I don't think it is morally justifiable.
That was not my argument.
But no, you asked me why I brought up the issue that the issue of how many people get killed. I said it is just to explain why I still do research in this area. This is just my own self-justification.
So there is this author, David Graeber. He's an anthropologist at the London School of Economics, and he wrote a book which is called Bullshit Jobs. And he interviewed people, highly paid people, mainly in investment banking and other things, and found out that they are very unhappy. They say, I don't do anything productive. I just write a report and somebody else looks a little bit and then he just files it, and I do nothing. And in the end of this book he says probably 45% of all jobs are bullshit jobs. And then he says, why are there so many bullshit jobs? And he says the CEOs of very big companies, they like to have a cord around them. And then he says, maybe we are going in the direction of feudalism again. And maybe this enlargement of bullshit jobs also explains, perhaps, I'm not sure, why productivity per person is not going up anymore.
So, you know, I know the argument about bullshit jobs, and I live in a university, and I think there is a tremendous amount of bullshit goes in the university. But I think when you get into it, it's much more complicated why it is happening. It's not because somebody thinks, oh, I want more people doing bullshit around me. I would feel better than that. I'll give you an example. If you look, there are more and more jobs that we are spending on what's called compliance. There are all kinds of rules. And we need more and more people to prove that we are complying with this and these rules. And society overall is becoming more and more risk averse. And they want to ensure that this doesn't happen and that doesn't happen. We have more and more people who have to do this. You know, you can argue this is multi-job, they're doing nothing productive. On the other hand, they are responding to the zeitgeist of society that want to make sure that nothing bad ever happens. You know, I don't know. It's a good question, but I don't think it happens for much more complicated reason than just somebody wants to feel important. I don't believe that this is the case.
So we have two or three. Two. Okay, two remarks. One.
Okay, yeah, just a bit back to this debate on what's going on in the labor market. What I've learned within the last year is, or for me at least, is that it's pretty much about speed. Many things are about speed and dynamics. So that's to add the last complexity piece to the economic debate. And you brought it up too, because the question is, how fast is technology evolving, and how fast can people adapt? And maybe you can make a coder out of a truck driver. I don't know. Some of them maybe. But at least it takes time, because all other coders also took time for them to adapt. And maybe you can also push people a bit up in qualifications. You can't make a university professor out of a truck driver within 30 seconds. And so this is also a question that is necessary to think of, and it also relates to regulation and how to deal with technology, because then sometimes it may be right to slow things down and think about if it's good to introduce something within a second, or just not be the first one in line, not being the leader in everything, and so on. It may be good to do that. It's not always good to be as fast as possible.
So even the CEO of Google said that he's worried that his corporation, the Google, is driving change at a pace that's it's just too hard for people to adapt in this change. So yeah, I mean, there is one thing to say, okay, I will not become a coder, but maybe children will become coders. But it takes a generation of the change to happen. So yeah, people have a difficulty adapting too fast. There was one more.
The last question.
Last comment.
Yes.
Yes, I want to add another dimension of this, of the problem. You've mentioned the numbers of jobs, you've mentioned the income, which changes, but I think we should also ask how the quality of the jobs changes, because I think it's very important. You have drift, technological driven drift to platform economies, for example, and there are jobs that are created in this part, sometimes high educated jobs. But you have a problem because most of the people working there are self-employed. So all things which are very important for the whole workforce, for the whole society, like social security, like rights of working rights, and so on, they don't count in this area. So I think also the politics have to deal with these problems, because there is a huge impact, not only for the number of the jobs which are created or not, but there is really a drift to jobs which are not secured, and where you have a neoclassical approach to lower the rights of the people. And I think if you look at this whole thing and the changes through technology, you have to be aware that this is also a problem.
So I know I'm out of time, so I'll answer very quickly. I focus here very much on one way that technology affects jobs, and this is the replacement. Right? There was a job, you replace this job by a machine. But this is just one out of many factors where technology impacts jobs. Another one, there is a fundamental question about the nature of the corporation. Why do corporations go in and hire people and become big? And the answer goes because it is cheaper for them to do the transaction internally than to do it externally. So it has all to do with transaction cost. Technology lowers transaction cost. That means it enables many more companies now take something used to do in-house, and now they outsource it. And the ultimate expression of this is what we call platformization. So you have a big transportation company, okay, they are now being valued at about 100, Uber is being valued around $100 billion, but they only have a few thousand, mostly programmers working for them. All other jobs, the driving has been outsourced, okay? And the third trend is what economists call disintermediation. There are many companies in the economy are really intermediaries. Travel agents is the classical example. I don't know how many of you are using travel agents. I haven't talked to travel agents for years because they have been disintermediated. So we used to have about 120,000 travel agents in the United States. Number has gone down to about 60,000. So I agree with you that the impact on technology and job market is multifaceted. I only took one sliver of it, which is the replacement, and only focused on that. But you're absolutely right. The other factors are important as well.
So thank you a lot. So now we are going to do two things. First, we go all to the yard and have a photo together. This is very important, and you follow Hannes, Wertner, and then we have a coffee break, and we come back 1/4 past. Back.